Good afternoon, everyone. It's Diamond G, back for another installment of Diamond G Speaks. Been on a bit of a hiatus. I took some time to really just kind of reflect on things. Um, Took some time with my brothers from the LDK Foundation. We're hitting the ground running, and we took a little time off to went for a little vacation, and it's so nice. I cannot underscore the importance of being able to take some time off with men who share the same bonds and your same ideals and morals and so on and so forth. With regards to different things that you're into, and it's just a wonderful experience to have, and I would encourage all men and also women who are in the same type of struggle to link up with people who you have a lot of commonality with. All right, so let's talk about a few things. I know a lot of people have been wondering how it is that so much time has gone by, and I've been very silent with regards to certain events that have occurred. But in the end, priorities are always first and foremost when it comes to my family. So before I really get into anything, I'd like to acknowledge the fact that my daughter, my eldest daughter, my firstborn, Gianna Leitner, I am so very proud of her. She is the only young lady, matter of fact, the only person in her entire school that is in an advanced honors program. So she is the only student in the that's in all advanced honors classes, and my wife Gigi and I, we could not be prouder. And we know that Grandma Yvonne, may she rest in peace, is looking down smiling, and Javon and Jelena, they also had a monumental achievement where they are the first brother and sister to be simultaneously honored for outstanding academic performance, and also they're considered excellent citizens. And it's just it's a blessing, and I couldn't be prouder. And it's a testimony to not just the hard work that my wife and I put in, but it's also a testimony to the people that we have around. Various friends who we have had for a very long time. Excuse me, who I refer to as family at this point, and they play a monumental role in the growth and the development of our children. And it truly does take a village, but not just any village. It needs to be a specially hand-picked village of upper echelon, upper tier individuals. And it's a great thing, and that's something that's been passed down, from my mother and my father and my grandparents on both sides of Tricentennial Lightners. So it's really something special. Now, that being stated, let's turn an eye towards something that has really gotten underneath my skin recently here. Now, the whole situation with domestic violence, a lot of you know how I feel about that. I have just no respect whatsoever from any man who puts his hands on a woman, and uses the excuse, oh well, she started it. When if you could look at this and say, okay, well, the woman slapped you upside your head. Okay, but the woman, in the majority of the cases, not all, majority of cases, I say ranges somewhere between 4'4" and say 5'6", while the man is going to range anywhere from, on average, I say 5'10" to 6'5", 6'6", in a lot of these situations. And the weight disparity is just ridiculous. Not to mention the fact that men are just inherently stronger physically than women the majority of the times, not all the time. So we've had this conversation within my own family. Those of you who know me know that this has been a stickler for me, especially since I was a younger child. And I had a very negative experience with domestic abuse, which is no secret, within my own home, with my mother and my father, and eventually my dad figured it out, and when we all got pretty much of age, I'll say, when we got into our teens, he was very adamant and outspoken in the fact that we should never ever put our hands on a woman, and the fact that what he had done, was the wrong thing to do, and he regretted it, every day of his life going forward. So, there are men who, can, at some point or another be redeemed. It's really sad though, because I've also had other family members who are, I name them as cowards, and we know who they are within the Trice family, and some of the Lightners. We know who they are. You put your hands on a woman, and you're a coward. It's not just the fact that you put your hands on a woman, but I'd say about 99.9% of the time, this punk of a man would not put his hands on another man. And I hear a lot of these so-called experts, pardon me, trying to justify, and try to rationalize and explain why it is that these men, are doing this. It's some sort of a psychological situation, and or it's, they saw the behavior and they deem the behavior to be appropriate, and that's BS. I'm going to explain to you how that is now. Myself and my two brothers, I know for a fact. Well, I'd say with certainty, I know that at least with myself and my younger brother, Aaron, my youngest brother, never ever put our hands on a woman. That was just not something, from what we saw, it was terrifying, and we never wanted our children to experience that. So the argument where an individual learns that behavior and they deem it as acceptable is just pure nonsense. All right, it's an act of cowardice. Now, you have other individuals, who will try to take the angle that the man, like he's just losing control or this, that, and the third. That's not what it is either. Most times these punks, these cowards, they get bullied during the course of their day at work, or another man, some guys are bigger than them and they get bullied at work all day. They don't have any type of power or control. So in order to make themselves feel better, they may come home and put their hands on their woman. Now, again, you can say what you want, but again, I take my cues from my father, and that was the explanation that he had given me, was that, hey, look, I felt pressure, and there was nothing I could do, and it was kind of out of control, and it gave me a temporary sense of empowerment, and see, these are the things that are not being basically understood by the population. So the pattern there, if you have someone, or that someone has been an abuser, and they're an elder, sit down and talk to them. I'm sure they're not going to tell you in any which way that it's acceptable behavior. Now, the secondary issue that I seem to have here is that domestic abuse takes place along every spectrum of every society. Unfortunately, within the so-called black community and other minority communities, there seems to be a tendency to assume that if the woman is she somehow asked for it, or because she's a woman of color, she's got a big mouth, somebody need to hit her in her mouth, and that type of thing. And I would argue that leads to go down a very slippery slope. One which is often not addressed within society. You know. Now we're gonna look at this from two different perspectives. One, we're just gonna look at it without ethnicity and without race involved. So let's just talk about the woman in general. Pardon me, a woman in general. Let's say it's a Caucasian woman and Caucasian man. Caucasian man, is beating on his woman. Big problem, big problem. Someone comes out against that. The woman is seen as a hero within the press. She's like, oh, son and soul's been whooping my ass, and I just had enough of it, and they're considered heroes. But what ends up happening majority of times when minority women come out and they say, hey, look, son and soul was whooping my ass and I had enough of it. The question automatically goes to, well, what did you do to cause that to happen? And I think that speaks to an underlying problem within society where women of color, and I'm not just talking about black women, so-called black women, but any woman of color is going to be facing additional scrutiny simply because of the color of their skin and the fact that society as a whole devalues women of color. Okay, now these are facts, and it's just a reality. So if you look at it from a standpoint of where the basic how could I say, the basic concept and the basic societal norm is that women are lower than men to begin with. Let's go with that construct. Okay, where we live in a society is dominated by males, okay, and women as a whole are considered lesser creatures. All right. Now I don't care how many different times you got the president saying, oh yes, there's fairness. There's no fairness. Okay, let's be clear. Women make less money to do the same exact job than a man does. No matter how good she is at it, she's going to be paid less. Statistically, that is a fact. All right. When women are in law enforcement, okay, they tend to be seen as either one or two things. One, weak, or two, if they're strong, opinionated, and they're doing their job just as good or better than their male counterparts, they're considered trying to be like a man. Something's got to be wrong with them. All right. And that permeates all, parts of our government, and all of our institutions, professional institutions, corporate institutions, even within sports, modern academia as well. All right. So, you look at that from that standpoint. Now that's just a woman, saying any woman. All right. Now you add on to the fact that you have women of color have been historically shown in this country and portrayed as whores. They're loose. They're extremely loose. They don't have control over their homes. And you can go back to the times of pre-slavery in this country, and it was always the mammy type attitude. Hands on their hip, finger out. Ultra aggressive. Even you'll have such individuals who like to speak. And they'll generalize that all black women. You have so-called black men that say, hey, I don't date black women because they're A, B, and C. Right? Now that's an erroneous statement, and again, it's sad because it's culturally the norm here, and what we need to do is really start to distinguish, within even the classes of so-called blacks, that you have low-class blacks, and you have those of us who are doing the right thing. Just as people are referred to as white trash, there is black trash. Okay, there are women who are taught the wrong way and do the wrong thing, and there are women who are taught the proper way and do the right thing. And we really need to start looking at that. When a woman, not particularly a woman of color, is opinionated, she's a bitch. If she's self-assured, she's a bitch. She thinks she's a man, right? Now you add on to that stigma a woman of color, where people of color in this country have been considered lesser creatures. There was a very, very telling documentary on the Roosevelt family. And, we could talk all day about that. I know some things about that family that would really blow people's minds. But, where even with Theodore Roosevelt, how even though he fought with blacks, so-called blacks, he shared his rations with them. When he got into presidency, he would, in order to try to protect himself, when he would go on tours, he would talk, especially he'd talk about how he's from the South and how black folks have a long way to go before they reach. It's going to take a few hundred years for them to get to the intelligence point of white or Caucasians, and that wasn't too long ago, my friends. Okay, that wasn't too long ago at all. So to assume, that, simply because a piece of paper says that, things should be equal, all things being considered are not necessarily equal. All right, and these are facts. Now, you may have those individuals who will say, you're playing the race card. Let me be clear. Okay, there's no such thing as playing the race card. Okay, the race, quote unquote, card is always there. Okay, you are on the card. Okay, if you are a female, you are on the card. If you are a male of color, you are on the card. If you are a person who chooses to identify yourself as gay or lesbian or any other thing that sets outside the norm, you are on the card. Okay, I find it when it comes to me, my understanding is when individuals start coming with language like that, talking about playing the race card, and that's what's happening is that they're uncomfortable within their own skin. They feel that they can't defend their position affirmatively without resorting to what would amount to name calling, and basically putting their fingers in their ears and closing their eyes to the situation, and we have that a lot, unfortunately, when it comes to this issue of domestic violence, you have individuals who have just kind of disappeared. Okay, now I talk about Ray Rice. I've got my own personal feelings about him. He's a coward. I'm going to keep it clean, but he wouldn't last 5 minutes in a room with me. And I'm disabled and I've got some problems. But I guarantee you, he would not raise his fist to me if he was in a confined space in an elevator. I can guarantee it. And what has happened here is that the so-called black leaders, oh yes, and I was going to be coming for him, the Minister Farrakhan's, the Al Sharptons, the Jesse Jacksons, these bunch of step and fetch it Negroes. What they do, they leave our women, out. They hang them out to dry. Okay, and that's what's happened here. Where have they been? Okay, now they jumped all over the Ferguson thing, right? Jumped all over it, ensured that an officer is not going to get a fair trial, and that's the worst thing that could have happened, because it takes the spotlight off of a problem. But I digress. Let me get back to this here. But where are they at? Okay, this man, hooked off on his woman, all right, and they're nowhere to be seen. They didn't put pressure on the NFL. Okay, the NAACP, they're supposed to help everybody. Okay, men and women. Okay, where were they at? Where was the outrage? Where was the support from them? For this woman who is clearly in a situation that is volatile, and she seems to be lost. She's in denial. Really. When you have an abuser, in my opinion, there has to be someone that's going to stand up and say, hey, look, this is the wrong thing to do. All right. Now, these people went quiet, and I don't think it's a surprise as to why they went quiet. Now, I've always, made remarks about, the quote-unquote American Negro. And, Ray Rice would fit that description, of his behavior, chases behind the ball for a living. This ignoramus named his daughter Raven after a football organization. Pure stupidity. Okay? Now, he fits in that box, in that mold. Okay? And if you guys refer back to my videos when I talk about the American Negro syndrome and how our society is set up and how these so-called black leaders prey on the American Negro, you would fully understand why it is that the NAACP, Jesse Jackson, and these so-called appointed black leaders, okay, have not spoken up. Because they rely, okay, and they prey on the American Negro. The American Negro is susceptible to emotional swings, okay? So this type of behavior, it does take place, and the American Negro, they all over it. I tell you that. Run around, white beaters, pants around their ankles, beat the brakes off their women. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen in other parts of the society. I'm talking specifically right now about so-called African American or so-called black culture in this country. All right. So let's be clear. I'm not saying that there are not so-called whites that beat the brakes off of their women, because oh yes, I know that. I know all about it. The guys I went to high school with, these were things that we really rallied around. We sat together and we talked about it at length. We would jump on guys who would beat their women up, beat their girlfriends up, and we would wear them out. And the one common bond that we had was that we had all experienced that at some point or another. Okay, but as of right this instant, what we're talking about here, we're talking about the problem within the so-called black culture, what I refer to as a subculture. Now, the reason why you didn't see the NAACP or these token Negroes say anything is because they don't want to offend that minority, that subculture that is the American Negro. Okay, because they rely on them for, to be easily swayed. They finance these fools who are they have their hands out, and they utilize them to their fullest. While they make up such a small portion of our society, they are so polarizing in their negative behavior, that it can actually sway the country in ways that you wouldn't think would be possible, but that's just the reality of the situation. So that's why we don't hear from them, and we don't see them. They're not going to come out and say nothing, because they don't want to bite the proverbial hand that feeds them, so now, what the question is, the challenge is, how many of us are going to stand up against this? Okay, now right now I have 3 daughters. I have another one on the way, and I'm telling you right now, if any man ever does to my daughters, if they even push one of my daughters, it's going to be lights out. You all might as well just call it in, say, hey, look, reserve G a spot, in the penitentiary, because he's coming, and that's what we need. We need more of a response like that. We need more men of color, particularly within the so-called black community, to stand up and let these young brothers know that this is not the right thing to do, and there are repercussions to be had. Now, of course, you can always go through the legal system, but again, you're looking at a system that is already rigged against the minority, which would be in this case a woman, and a woman of color on top of that, no good. You're still dealing with a system that at times, majority of the times, is kind of stuck in its ways. We've evolved as a society somewhat, but the legal system has not. Okay, they are very prejudicial in the way things are done. Even when I'm gonna give you an example. A restraining order. These judges pat themselves on the back because they'll take out a restraining order. Again, like, oh yeah, I got this restraining order against you, Joe Willie. You know, you don't come within 100 yards of your woman. Joe Willie's like, yeah, okay. Joe Willie decides, you know what, I done had it. You know what I'm saying? Ain't nobody gonna tell me what to do. I'm gonna whoop this bitch's ass. So what Joe Billy do, he get his gun and he goes to the woman. The woman holds up the restraining order. You know what I'm saying? Dude still takes her out. Okay? There's no repercussions for that. You know? And you would think that over time, you know, that you know, society, you know, and these politicians would understand that there has to be a more stringent, you know, and just there needs to be a very, very powerful response other than just giving a piece of paper, because it's not working. It's not working, y'all. You know, so the question is, what can we do? Okay, what can we do? I would say this, you know, men who beat on women, you know, they need to be lit up. Okay, now I'm not one to advocate violence at all. Okay, but you know, certain elements of our society only respond, you know, and only understand violence. You know, and my example within the so-called black community is the American Negro, right? You cannot reason with the American Negro. You cannot sit down and have a dialogue with him, you know, or her. It's not going to work, okay? People wonder why it is that, you know, law enforcement has such a hard, just a really tough time in a lot of these areas where American Negroes are prevalent. And they wonder why they're getting shot. Right? And he's like, oh man, well this guy, you know, he shot him in the chest. Oh, how come the police officer couldn't have shot this guy in his foot? Yeah, he was beating the crap out of his wife, you know, and he had a knife, but, you know, they could have tried to reason with him. Well, tell me this. How do you reason with a person, you know, who psychologically is incapable of understanding what you're talking to them about? If you try to approach them in a way which is constructive, you know, and you try to, you know, build a foundation of reason with a person that cannot be reasoned with, what options are you left with? You know, there has to be you know, our society sends mixed signals all the time. You know, we're dealing with situations where, you know, let me change gears here for just one moment. You guys got to excuse me. I want to talk about Adrian Peterson. All right, this is a prime example. Now, this fool, you know, and this falls under domestic violence, is putting a switch, whooping a 4-year-old with a switch. Who the hell does that? Who does that? Okay? An individual like him, do you really believe that talking to him and reasoning with him is going to rehabilitate him? No, because his mind has broken down to the point where it's mush. Okay? Talking to that fool and trying to rehabilitate him, you know, is like talking to a damn tomato that's rotten. You know, he took delight in glee in beating the hell out of a 4-year-old with a switch. You know, that's a problem. You know, and this is where, you know, you really got to wonder. You know, in this society, we often talk about how civilized we are. You know, and you know, but the question is, how do civilized men deal with an uncivilized individual? What we used to do was just eliminate them from society as a whole. Okay? I will say this. Adrian Peterson, he likes to beat kids with switches. He likes to whoop a 4-year-old with switches. And from the report that I read, he whooped this kid and hit him on his scrotum. Not a problem. You know what I'm saying? I say we let somebody, you know what I'm saying, perhaps a person like myself, let me pick a switch off the tree and whoop his ass. You know, same way he did that little kid. Whip him on his scrotum where his testicles sit at. And we'll see, you know, how fair he thinks that is to put on a 4-year-old child. Now, I got whooped with switches when I was little, you know, but I wasn't that damn little. I'm talking about, you know, 8, 9, 10 years old. You know, I got whooped with switches. You know what I'm saying? And would I whoop my kids with switches? No. I find it, you know, I would find it that there's a better way. You know what I'm saying? Because there's a tendency of individuals to not know their own strength. You're a grown adult and you're taking a damn stick to a little kid. That's a problem. Okay? And the fact that people Like Adrian Peterson said, oh, I couldn't get him to cry. You trying to hurt this kid? You know, because you can't break him to make him cry, you think that that's acceptable? Nah, we should whoop his ass. The same way that he did that to the kid, pull his pants down and beat his ass with a switch. You know what I'm saying? And make sure his one's maybe got some prickles on it and teach him a lesson. You know? So the same type of ideology has to be applied to woman beaters. Okay? You know, you like beating on women, no problem. You know? Take a look at the statistics. When an individual like that is incarcerated, you know, there are certain things that within the jail and within the criminal system, there are codes, man, even amongst criminals. They hate rapists, woman beaters, and kitty touchers. You're any one of those three, you go to jail, you're done. They're going to get you. You know what I'm saying? They may not kill you, but they're going to get you. You know what I'm saying? Because law enforcement can't be watching all the time. You know? And I think that's something that we should really, really look at. You know, woman beaters, you know, there need to be stricter penalties. There should not be a slap on the wrist. You should not be able to hit your woman and get out on even $1 million bail. You know, you need to sit in jail. It should be mandatory. You know what I'm saying? And we're not talking about situations where a woman may make up an allegation of domestic abuse. You know, we're not talking about that. We're talking about a situation like with Ray Rice. Yeah, he, wham! You know what I'm saying? Man, cleaned her out. Well, no problem, Mr. Rice. You go to prison. You know, you go to prison and you're going to do some time. You know, and that's just the reality of the situation. You know, we've now gotten to the point where, you know, these fools within the NFL, you know, Roger Goodell, who's a piece of crap, in my opinion. I just don't like him because, you know, a lot of people, you already know how I feel about modern day sports. You know, there's a lot of what I consider institutionalized racism. You know, and unfortunately, it's not just racism. You can say discrimination, because you have these individuals who get put into this system. You know, they're bought, they're sold, they're traded. They are commodities. They're not human beings. That's why I've always said that no child of mine will ever play in the NFL or the NBA. They will not be treated like animals and like cattle to be herded. Okay? So, you know, you look at these individuals and what's the bottom line everyone's been talking about? Profits. Roger Goodell don't give a damn about women. He don't care. His track record is you know, is basically proof enough of that. You know, Brandon Marshall, right? Scumbag. You know what I'm saying? Beat his woman up. You know, now he gets on TV and what do they say? He talking about, oh, I was young and dumb and made mistakes. Is that supposed to make it okay? And then in the next breath he says, well, you know, she attacked me. You know, and there really seems to be some sort of that idea is being given a lot of credence. You know, how could that be? That occurs because we live in a society that is ripe with double standards, and you know, we really need to try to take a stance and try to find a way to empower our women. And like I say, it starts with us. It starts with me. It starts with you. You know, take ownership. You know, protect your woman. Okay? Protect them. They are our greatest commodity. You know, I'll never forget how, you know, I sat, you know, with my father, you know, when he got older. And, you know, the one thing he would tell me, you know, was that, he said, son, he's like, the only way to build a strong Israel, because, you know, we talked a lot about, you know, how do you build strong, productive Jewish men. And he said the only way to do that is to have a strong woman. How in the world can you expect strength to come from your men when your women are being preyed upon and are marked as weak? You know, I know the times are changing, but the majority of the responsibility when it comes to raising families often falls to the mothers. And that's with them working jobs full time. Okay? And they are the single most important influence on a young male's life. You know, so like my father would say, it starts with the women. If your woman is strong and you support her, you in turn will build strong men. Okay? and you want to try to pass that on, and you want them to in turn marry a strong woman and protect her. So that way when they have daughters, they themselves as well, will be strong and will be less prone to be preyed upon by the lowlives that are sliding around out there. All right. So I'm going to sign off on that note, and I hope you all have enjoyed this.